Greetings to all our listeners. My name is Alikhan Timaev. I represent a group of like-minded individuals from Muslim countries in the post-Soviet space. I myself am from the Chechen Republic. Also in our Institute of Like-Minded People, we have brothers from the Volga region in Central Asia. We are united by the idea of dismantling the so-called Russian state. In the future, we'll try to explain all the nuances of why we came to this decision. This decision was made not only by us, but by our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. For 5 centuries, during the 500 years of the Russian Empire's existence, we have endured state terror by Russians on our lands. I personally have experienced torture, kidnappings, and survived 2 bloody wars that are incomparable to any Holocaust. Our grandfathers survived 3 Holocausts at the hands of the Russian world. Unfortunately, throughout history, Europe has mostly allied with Russia when they've destroyed entire nations, as we see today in Ukraine and previously in Syria and elsewhere. Our task today in Europe and the UK is to identify Russian intelligence operatives posing as opposition figures, from Khodorkovsky to Navalny's group and all their associated experts. "99% of these people are Russian Special Service employees who continue information warfare. They've lost physical capabilities, so now they wage information terror across Europe against all peoples, especially Muslims and those from post-Soviet states. Everything they report, the companies they film, and all information they spread about our peoples is 100% false. This is one of the Russian state's most powerful tools against both unfavorable nations and individuals. So we have an urgent request to like-minded citizens of Great Britain and other European countries. We're seeking allies to identify these so-called Russian opposition members and expose all the crimes they continue committing throughout Europe. The main task we have is identifying their accomplices who work as officials in European institutions across Europe. Because only with their help can these people escape criminal responsibility and similar consequences. Regarding our Chechen people specifically, 99% of these individuals have, over the past 30 years, conducted informational, material, moral, physical, and all forms of so-called military genocide and terror against specific groups. All this, the so-called Russian opposition, are accomplices in what is today called the Russian state. All these people were nurtured by the same office of the Russian Federation. All these people today, everything they're doing in Europe is again funded by criminal money earned from the blood of the so-called Russian peoples. So people understand what Russia and Russian peoples under Russian occupation and terror really are. 90% of all wealth and territories that make up what's called Russia today. All this territory and its riches belong to non-Russian peoples from within the so-called Russian Federation. Today's Russian so-called state was created directly by European officials who, despite the bloodshed and war crimes Russia committed, continued making contracts with them, doing business, and financing the Russian Federation's treasury, half of which funded killing innocent people from Africa to the North Caucasus, Asia, the Volga region, and beyond. Therefore, we have important tasks ahead to identify these people, stop their lies, and hold these participants in war crimes accountable. Khodorkovsky himself is the financier of two war terrors, two genocides by the Russian people against the Chechen people. Each of these people is stained with blood. So our task today is to prevent Europe from creating another Putin in the form of so-called Khodorkovsky, Yashin, Kara-Murza, and others like them, what they call the Russian opposition. In Russia, Putin's come and go. Russia remains. Russia's ideology to turn everyone else into the Russian world has continued to exist throughout these 5 centuries. Unfortunately for Europeans and politicians, history teaches them nothing. That's why today half of Europe's budget is directed toward military needs to resist the Russian Federation. This wouldn't have happened if Europe hadn't spent the last 30 years financing and establishing the dictatorship of the Russian Federation. Therefore, we're now launching our YouTube channel for English-speaking audiences, so citizens of Great Britain and other European nations know exactly what's happening in the Russian Federation and what people living in the so-called Russian Federation think about all this. Thank you for listening.